Hello, this is a screencast to review the earthworm dissection. We'll be going over both the external parts of the earthworm as well as the internal parts and talking about the functions of all of the parts. First, this folder, Earthworm Dissection Pictures, will be shared with you, and so you will have access to these pictures to include in your lab report and label them appropriately. First, let's look at the earthworm external. So here we're looking at the external picture of the earthworm. There are three things that you need to label on this picture. The first is the mouth, located right in this space. The second is the anus, located in this space. And then the clitellum is located right here. The reason that we know that this is the mouth and this is the anus is that the mouth is always closest to the clitellum. So mouth, clitellum, and anus. We also, during the lab, felt the CT, but you do not need to label them on this picture because they were so microscopic you could not see them with the naked eye. I'm going to move on to the internal portion of the pictures. I have two internal pictures. We're going to go over both of them. The first one is from a non-preserved worm, and so there's vivid colors in it, whereas the second one is a preserved worm, which will look very similar to the ones that we did in the lab. Here is the non-preserved worm, where the colors are a little bit more vivid. So in this picture, we can see quite a lot of things that are going on. For your lab, you're going to need to identify a variety of various parts. So the first thing is that you're going to identify the mouth up here at the top, and then it will then connect with the esophagus. And so the esophagus runs right along here. There is the pharynx up here, but you don't need to label it. But it runs, the esophagus starts here, this kind of pink piece right here, and then that pink piece will then travel in towards here. It goes underneath all this stuff and then connects here with the crop. This big giant fleshy ball right here is known as the crop, and then right next to it is the gizzard. So we go from mouth to the esophagus. It runs all the way down here till we reach the crop, the gizzard. And then this large kind of black mass right here is the intestines of the worm. And the intestines of the worm actually runs all the way down. Here you can see that part of the membrane of the intestines has been opened up, and that's just some dirt that was located inside of the worm. If we look at the reproductive organs of the earthworm, these are these larger white pieces here and here. Those are the seminal vesicles, and that is the male reproductive organs. And then these two little balls right here on this side, those are the seminal receptacles. Those are the female reproductive organs. So the large pieces are seminal vesicles, and the small ones right here is the seminal receptacles. The last two things that you need to label for your picture, first is the aortic arches. They're these little black little things right here, and those actually go around the esophagus, and they serve as the heart for the worm, and so that is the aortic arches. And then the last thing is the clitellum, and in this picture you can tell where the clitellum starts because you can see here is the skin, but then it changes color right here, and then it goes back to being skin color. The clitellum is right here where this pin is located. That is where the clitellum is for this worm. So that is the internal parts of this picture. We're going to go look at the second one, which might be a little more familiar for you. You can use either picture for your lab report, but I just wanted to give you an option. So here is earthworm internal number 2, where it is done by a preserved worm. So in this, again, we start here with the mouth up in this location, and then you can start to see this tube right here is the start of your esophagus. And so this part right here you can identify as the esophagus. And then that esophagus is going to run right on down. And then there's this fleshy ball right here, and that is your crop. And then this kind of harder part is your gizzard. and then it's attached here to the intestines. And there it's kind of gotten opened up. You can see the dirt located inside, but then the intestines continues on in a tube down the worm. Here is the reproductive organs. So here's this kind of tan, fleshy parts right here and here, as well as here. That is the seminal vesicles. Again, the male reproductive organs. These little ball structures right here are the seminal receptacles. Those are the female reproductive organs. And then the last two things that are on the list to be able to identify, here is an aortic arch, which we said before is the heart. So you have the aortic arches, and then we also have the clitellum. And again, you can see the clitellum is down here. You follow the skin color, and there, right there, it changes skin color, and that is where the clitellum is located here on the worm, and then it goes back to just the regular worm skin. So that's the labeling for our worm, and so make sure that you label them appropriately for your lab report. Now, in regards to what lots of these things do, all this information was located in the lab, but I'm just doing a quick review of it here as well. So the first thing is the CT, and those are those microscopic hairs that were on the sides of the worm, and those little CT, they help with the movement of the worm through the dirt. The next thing is listed is the pharynx, and the pharynx is helping the worm swallow food. So the pharynx helps it swallow its food. Then you move on into the crop, and the crop is where food is stored until it gets digested. So no digestion actually happens in the crop. It's just a place where the food gets stored until it passes further on into the gizzard. And the gizzard is where they break down, the worm breaks down the food in a grinding action. And so the gizzard does a good portion of the digestion for the worm. Then you need to mention what the aortic arches do. And as I mentioned before, the aortic arches is the heart of the worm. And so they help pump the blood down the dorsal blood vessel down to the anus, and then that blood will return back up through the ventral blood vessel back to the aortic arches. The earthworm doesn't really have a true heart, as we know in more advanced animals, but these aortic arches serve as a heart to pump the blood. After the aortic arches, there is the dorsal blood vessel. And the dorsal blood vessel, you can see it here in this picture. This is part of it. It runs right there on top of and it continues all the way down. The top of the earth, the dorsal blood vessel, it will pass blood down. I'm going to pause. Sorry for that pause. We are on to the dorsal blood vessel. Again, I indicated it here on top. And the dorsal blood vessel, it carries the blood up to the aortic arches from the anus. So it carries the blood all the way up to the top. And then there is a secondary blood vessel. We can't see it here in the picture, but that is the ventral blood vessel, and that is located on the bottom side of the worm. And that blood vessel carries the blood to the intestines as well as the skin through the rest of down to the anus. So dorsal blood vessel carries blood up to the aortic arches, whereas the ventral blood vessel carries blood from the aortic arches down to the rest of the worm, down to the anus. We have then the clitellum, where the clitellum serves as a place used in terms of reproduction. And so the clitellum is this space where it will, I'm going to pause again. Clitellum. So the clitellum is right here. It's the kind of tube structure that goes around the worm, and it is used in reproduction. It helps form a cocoon that helps deposit the eggs during reproduction. So it creates this cocoon for the eggs that the worm is producing during that reproduction cycle. The next thing on our list after the clitellum is the nephridia. We don't have a really good shot of the nephridia. Oh, there it is, right up here on this little tiny line that goes along that. And the nephridia, it serves as a way to remove waste from the body. So it's these little white tubes and it's part of the digestive tract, and it helps remove waste from the body of the worm. Then we have seminal vesicles, and again, we mentioned the seminal vesicles. They are these larger pieces right here, and that is the male reproductive organs, and they produce the sperm of the worm. Again, remember, segmented worms are hermaphroditic, meaning that they have both male and female parts. So the seminal vesicles are the male reproductive organs, and they produce the sperm. Then we have the intestine, which again serves as part of the digestion of the food and passes the food that is digested all the way down to the anus. And then the last thing that needs to be mentioned is the ganglia. And the ganglia, it's too small to see, but that ganglia is located up here near the mouth of the worm, and that serves as a network of nerves, otherwise known as the brain of the earthworm. So that is our screencast of the worm. Again, make sure that you label all of your pictures appropriately and answer it. The last thing, one more thing, sorry. It says, why is it said that an earthworm has a closed circulatory system? So most animals that have veins will have a closed circulatory system, and that means that the blood goes from a heart and then passes through those veins all the way down to its extremities, and then that blood then returns back to the heart through a series of veins. And so here for our worm, it then pumps the blood from the aortic arches down the ventral blood vessel, and then it comes back up the dorsal blood vessel, creating a closed system. We will learn about an open circulatory system when we look at insects, where their organs just kind of swim in a pool of the blood. That's what causes insects to be so squishy. But here we've got a closed circulatory system because all of the blood is located in the veins. Thank you very much, and good night.